What's up, everybody? Welcome to coffee. Welcome to Coffee Chat with Steven. So you might notice that there's no fancy intro today. There's no polished lighting or sound or music or anything of the sort. In fact, you can probably hear that my voice is a little lower than usual, and that's because my family's fighting sickness today. This whole week. Let's talk about struggles, folks. First of all, I hope everyone has brought their coffee. There's been a lot going on in my head recently. I hope this can be just an enjoyable time to hang out with you guys and to have some real conversations, just to be authentic and transparent with you guys. You guys are always super supportive, and I appreciate that. And I also want to just make this kind of an open forum for any questions you might have, whether that's about me personally or Simple Samples Audio or Family First Composer, or any of the reasons you might know me. And I'm hoping that it can just be a hangout time, a cool, chill time. Because I know a lot of times my schedule is full, and it dictates that I don't get to spend a lot of one-on-one time with you guys. And I do love getting to do that. And occasionally I can jump on a Zoom call with you guys and just hash out what's going on in your world. But I can't always do that because there's a lot of you. There's a lot of you guys. So I hope that moments like this, we can just connect and have a cool, real conversation just about life, about music career, or anything in between. And I have a few thoughts in my mind that might be worth sharing, that might be interesting for you guys. But first and foremost, I want to serve you and honor your time. If you have any specific thoughts or questions or problems or whatever, I hope that this can be valuable for you guys. So that's why there's no music playing. I'm not going to cut away to another screens or whatever. I just want to have a real chat with you guys. And I hope you got your coffee, tea, water, whatever your drink of choice is today. And I know that you guys join in from all around the world. So I don't know if it's morning, afternoon, or nighttime for you, but whatever the case, I appreciate you're here. But yeah, let's talk about struggles. I think that's an important topic that we don't talk enough about in this space, in this industry. I think first and foremost, this week has been just a struggle with physical sickness in my family. Thankfully, there's no COVID. We're all safe. But when you have little ones, as many of you know, when you're in daycares and when you're just traveling a lot and stuff, there's a lot that can happen, and you can bring that home and share it with everybody. Thankfully, we're all safe and we're all well, but weeks like this are just a particular challenge, and that's why I'm not doing the traditional live composing show later today as I normally would. But I don't have the strength to do that today, the focus to write any music today. But that's okay. I thought this would be a cool way just to chat with you guys. But of course, I know that the primary audience here is, if I look at my YouTube analytics, the vast majority of you guys are fathers. The vast majority of you guys are a little bit older, so in that more like the 25 to 40 range. And there's actually a large chunk of you that are even in the 40 to 60 range, which is pretty cool. But mostly men. And I'm not surprised by that because, the video game space and the technology space are predominantly dominated by men. But I think that really lends itself to a different type of conversation, because I know that I'm primarily speaking to dads, primarily speaking to men who want to become dads, who want to have a family, they want to support their family. So I think the conversation has always been from that perspective of how can we support our families the best way possible, financially, but also spiritually and emotionally. How can we be present for them? How can we be flexible for them? And that's my story. And a week like this just helps to shine light on that it's all about family. And that's literally the title of my book right behind me, Family First Composer. And really you could just call that Family First Person, insert occupation here, right? And hey, Chu in the chat says, yep, my 3-year-old was kind of sick too. I think weeks like this are just particularly challenging because, my heart's desire is to work. I love working. I love getting to serve you guys in a bunch of different capacities, whether that's music or teaching or creating simple sample instruments. But family has to come first. And so a week like this where every decision has to be based around how can I change my schedule? How can I be available to help my wife, help my kids, just to do well this week. And I never know quite how successful I am at it, but it's just want to bring that up. That's something we don't talk enough about, that, the reason why we do what we do. Because at the end of the day, I'm so thankful that I have a career that I don't want to say funds itself, but is in large part passive income. So I like to think of it as gardening, right? Or as farming, that you plant the seeds, you water the seeds, and then you see years later, usually, or months and months later, you see the results of that. And it's not something that's instant. I think we live in a culture of instant gratification where everybody just they want to get paid for all their work, and they want an instant result, but it's just not that way, especially if you're going to try to build an online business. If you're going to try to make something of meaning that's sustainable over the long term, you have to make sure that you're actually watering over time. But I'm very thankful that weeks like this where I can barely work, and it feels like when I go to the studio and I try to do some work, it just feels almost meaningless, because it's like, what am I really going to be able to do? I can't focus, don't feel great, family's not doing great. Weeks like this, it makes me doubt, oh man, am I even doing anything of meaning, right? But I'm so thankful that during weeks like this, and you could even zoom out and say during a global pandemic when there's so much uncertainty, how cool is it that we have savings, right? How cool is it that we have products and passive income, that stuff keeps coming, and has very little to do with my active presence, right? And that's why I talk so much to you guys about active versus passive income, and why it's so valuable to have. It's so valuable to have. And I'm just so thankful for that. Let me say, hey, a lot of you guys have been popping in. What's up, Will, Chu, Andy, Jazz, Jacob, Spiral, David. Hey, what's up, Will? Brian, Wood. Appreciate you guys. Andreas, Lorian. What are you guys saying? Yeah. Okay. Wood has a music question. What kind of headphones for composing? There are a million out there. If you're interested, I do have a full gear guide that might be super helpful for you. Let me pull it up real quick. I'm always happy to give you guys links. I'll pop this up in the chat. This is for, who asked that? Wood, check out that link right there. I've gone through a full list, and I've done a studio tour of all the equipment I have, including these current headphones I'm wearing right now, the Grado Labs, and then Audio Technica. Those are my two favorite. Doesn't mean they're the best, but they are. They're always in the top 5, top 10 lists. But I like to have an active and a passive pair, or whatever they're called. Already forgetting the terminology, but help me, guys. Closed versus open. Sorry. So this is called an open pair of headphones. So it just means that the volume's actually coming out. There's speakers on my head. It's kind of funny. You can actually see the speakers. So the people in the room around me, they can actually hear, but this is really good for mixing, and I like to not be in my head. So like when I'm talking on a microphone like this, I like to be able to hear the room around me. So that's why I like to have this particular type of headphones. You just gotta be careful because the volume will bleed into the microphone. But that's why I have a condenser mic like this that's not going to pick up much of anything else but my voice. I'm sorry, man, I'm getting all my word wrong. This is a dynamic microphone. But the Audio Technica are closed headphones, so that means that when I wear those, they're going to be super closed. They're going to be super quiet everywhere else in the room. No one's going to be able to hear me, so that's really, really great whenever Well, if there's kids, let's be honest. If it's late at night, early morning, or if there's kids in the room, whatever, people don't want to hear me, then I'm definitely going to be using that kind of headphone. And whenever I'm recording my voice properly, whether I'm singing or talking like a podcast, whatever, I need to make sure that I'm wearing those. That way there's no bleed. So that's how that goes. Hopefully that's helpful. And I love how Brian says, family always first. Everything works itself out when you honor your loved one first. Totally. That is so true. And Brian says, the opposite of success is not failure, it's quitting. I could talk on that for a minute. I think failure is, as much as I hate failing, as long as you fail forward and you're constantly learning from your failures, I think failure is actually one of the greatest teachers. It's one of the greatest things. It's just one of the greatest things you could ever do. I think when you try often, when you fail often, you now have real data to work with to move forward. Yeah. Chance has a great question. Do you have any approach to mixing vocals? I've been doing it lately and it's hard. Yeah. Mixing vocals is a special kind of mixing, because it always has to do with the context of what you're working on, which is not, it's one of those things that there really is no hard rule of how to make it sound good. But my one rule of thumb that does carry all the way through is you always want your vocals to be central in the mix. So like not left, not right, but centered, and you want them to be forward. So if you think of, I like to always think of mixing as a 3D space. You have 3 axes, right? You have X, Y, and Z. Z would be the depth. So most people can naturally, maybe when you're a beginner, you can naturally figure out the X and the Y, because that's all we really think about. We think of left versus right, panning, right? And we think up versus down, the Y axis. We think of using reverb or delay to help create that. But the third layer, the depth layer that most people do not think about, and that's really the 10% between the good and the great, is that 10% of depth, and that is controlled by EQ. And that really is, that's my favorite thing to start with, because if you start with EQ first in your chain, then you can really figure out where in the depth of your field, of your 3D space, you want it to be. So if you have a vocal, I would first work with the EQ, and every single vocal is different because everyone's different. Some people have a nasally voice, some people have a really low, deep voice. So it's important to find where that EQ needs to sit, and that way that vocal really pops through. And a fun story with that, something that I do just as a volunteer is I serve at my church. I serve in one of the youth ministries where they regularly have a live band on stage. And I love getting to do that, getting to work with students and getting my hands on real mixers and real faders, and just working in a live environment is a ton of fun. And working in a large room with great speakers, it's such an interesting experience, because what I've noticed is every single time there's a band, it's a different person singing. So even though we have these preset EQs where it just has like little notches and stuff based on the room, based on the frequencies, even though we have these preset EQs settings per microphone, per person, every single week I have to change it. I have to update it for that specific person, because every single human on earth has a different voice, sounds different, and you have to modify. And this is one of those difficult things, because when we talk about mixing vocals versus mixing like a violin, yeah, you could say that, there's every violin sounds different, and that might be slightly true, but every violin's mostly gonna, cover a certain frequency spectrum. It's kind of gonna sound the same. But with vocals, every single human is so different, that this is why it's so hard to master that skill set, because it changes every single time you do it. It's hard to know. So perhaps a good way to practice that might be to constantly work with the same person until you can really understand, to gauge, am I even getting better? Or maybe keep working with the same samples from the same person, that kind of thing. That way you can kind of measure how far you can actually get over time. That's my suggestion. But mixing is one of those things that just takes time. It's 100% ears, has almost nothing to do with your knowledge of what to do, Because even when I look at the screen and I see the EQ curve for a particular vocalist, what if they're sick that day, right? Or whatever, and they're still singing, or you know what I mean? Like right now, my vocal is very different than a normal day. So, much more nasally. So if I was going to go into the EQ curve, I would actually pull down the upper range, and then I'd probably boost the mids and pull down the lows. So you're actually going to just change it more customized to that situation. So it's just one of those things that you have to practice constantly if you want to get good at it. That's why there are dedicated vocal mixers. What else you guys saying? Brian says, Steven, I'm thinking about acquiring an analog synth. Currently, it's between the DeepMind 6 and possibly the Poly D. What are your final thoughts on the Poly D now that you've had time to live with it? So he's talking about this guy back here, my Poly D. I did a review on that a while ago. It's a really cool analog synth that replicates the Mini Moog. So the classic Mini Moog from Moog, which is the very first famous portable analog synth from the 70s. And it's really good. I love it. So the comparison he's talking about is DeepMind 6 they're both by Behringer. DeepMind 6 is actually an analog and software synth. So it has an onboard computer basically that adds the effects. So it's an analog synth, but with all the knobs, but it also has the effects. So personally, I can't speak for you, but Brian, I would just go with an analog synth completely, because the way that I write music is you can kind of see all the cables back here, sort of. I have a bunch of cables. I have it routed to my audio interface for audio, just direct input if I just want to capture the sound, but it's also connected to a MIDI cable. It's a MIDI USB cable like you'd connect any keyboard, connected to, I guess, the back of my computer, one of my USB hubs. So what that means is when I play in my DAW, I can just hit record on a MIDI track and an audio track, and it's going to actually capture both. And it's going to record both. So if I just want to keep the MIDI data, I can. Or I can reverse route it where when I push spacebar on my DAW, it'll actually play the MIDI, and then the audio will come out of the synth. And because it's being captured in an audio track, it'll actually capture both. So I get the best of both worlds. So all I have to do is throw effects, digital effects. And the way that I see it is I've already spent lots of money over the years acquiring really nice digital effects in the box. So I'd rather not have to go spend a bunch of money on guitar pedals and ways of doing hardware effects, at least not at this stage. Now that I'm just kind of tiptoeing into the synth world. So that's my pick. I think the Poly D is a better bargain. Between those two, you'll get more of the synthy gritty sound and the Mini Moog that is just so iconic for its bass lines that I don't know how else to replace it. I wouldn't want to do that digitally. So yeah. Andy asks, hope this is interesting for you guys. This is fun, just answering your questions. Andy says, when you are starting a new project for a new client and their piece of media, what information do you make sure to get from them? What are some of the details you always want to have before working? I think this varies from composer to composer, but for me personally, I like to always have some kind of visual. This is actually one of the difficulties with working with filmmakers versus video games. Or you could even say podcast and anything that's more audio based. I have to have something to work with because I mean, you can say one word, right? You can say despair, and I can go over to a piano and write a piece of music that sounds like despair. But the thing about media in general is there's always expectations and there's always parameters, limitations. And unless you ask good questions to understand your client, unless you've worked with them before and you already know, you got to know that stuff. Otherwise, you're going to write something that is your expectation of what that word means and what the length should be and what the instrumentation should be. All these things you're just going to assume because of your background, but it's not actually going to serve the client. So if you're going to serve them well, you have to ask questions. And what I've learned is the more you've worked with somebody, the less questions you have to ask because you already understand their properties and what they like and what they don't like and all that. Versus a brand new client, you're going to have to ask a lot of questions. So I highly recommend, if you really want to do this to the best of your ability, I would recommend grabbing coffee with that client and just have an hour-long chat before you even write a note. And if you can't do that, if it's an international project, whatever, get on a Zoom call, get on the phone, something. You need to have a human face-to-face interaction with your client. You need to actually meet them. None of this back and forth email nonsense. I've done that. It's emotionless, and it's almost impossible to read between the lines of what people actually want versus what they need. So this is one of those times that you just literally sit down for about an hour and you have a discussion with your client about, hey, just tell me about the project. Tell me about you. Meet the person, meet their background, just understand. The more questions you can ask them, the better you're going to do when you actually write the music, because it's going to be much more catered to their style, their interests, their influences, and all that. Because if you can find out what they love, and if that's something you love too, and you can connect on that, man, you can really knock it out of the park, and you can do a much better job. And that's one of the top ways to avoid revisions. Nobody likes revisions. I'm actually... Who asked that question? That was Andy. Andy, I'm going to pop a link in here real quick. This might be helpful for you. I'm going to pull open. Have a lot of videos on YouTube that might be helpful for you, but this one in particular. There's one about revisions. Here we go. I reposted it a while, so it didn't get a lot of traction, but here we go. Here you go, Andy. That'd be helpful for you. That's a video that I went through a few of the top ways that I have learned over the years to reduce or completely eliminate revisions with a client. And it's really based around your question. It's based around what questions to ask. And it has a lot more to do with learning about the person than it does the project. Because even if you know everything you need to know about the project, if you don't know the person, their descriptive words could mean something completely different than what you think they mean. Because if someone says, I've actually had this is a true example, not to pick at anybody, but I had a client once, a filmmaker who said, I want it to sound militaristic. Can you please use violins? And so my composer brain said, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll take some violins and do something like chugga, 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 something that's like intense. And that's what militaristic means to me, right? I'm like, that's a pretty universal word. People, that should translate, right? And then I go to actually write the thing, and he wanted a snare drum. Of course, that's what militaristic means to him, right? And then he kept saying the word violins, but he really meant a solo cello. But he didn't know the music terminology. And I had to have a conversation with him about, okay, what are you actually going for here? And that's where it's helpful to ask them for some reference tracks. Okay, these are the words you're saying. Can you give me an example of militaristic? And it could be something totally different than what you would have written. And that's really that translation, that communication, that if you can figure out how to let them show you things, you can be the translator between those two things. So yep, hope that's helpful for you. Let's go over to Lorian, who says, do you have any suggestions or tips for hiring an orchestra? I do. Let me keep going. You asked 3 questions. I might not be able to get to all of them. You said, I have the opportunity to make a soundtrack for a game, and I would like to have advice on the rates and conditions of hiring an orchestra. Okay, that's a totally different question. And if you have any advice to give me from someone who has already experienced these sessions. Lorian, okay. There are a lot of ways to go about this. Ultimately, it's going to be, you need to know, it's kind of exactly what we just said about, talk with your client about, I'm assuming this is for, you said it's for clients, for a game. Talk to that client about what their expectations are. And your job as a composer, if you're going to be wearing all the hats here, your job is to actually find the right solution. Okay? So what that means is they might be asking for an orchestra, and I got to do the biggest air quotes I can. They might be asking for an orchestra, but that might not actually be what they need. I was actually talking to a client a couple weeks ago. It's for a project I didn't get the gig on, but one of their top concerns is they said, we have a limited budget. Here's what we can pay. Here's what we want to do with it. And my first suggestion was, hey, let's hire an orchestra. This will solve this. And they came back and they said, nope, it's not that important to us to do that. We would much rather maybe just hire one soloist or hire nothing and just do all sampled orchestra. And, my artistic heart is over here dying because I'm like, no, this deserves it. It needs it. This is the emotion you're going for. But at the end of the day, if we really think as a business person and we think as the end consumer, someone who's just listening to this, or like in this case, this was for a podcast, for an audio drama where, the music's going to be pretty low in the background. There's lots of sound effects and stuff. No one's going to know if it's a real orchestra or not. And the price difference is significant. So you have to really understand what is the end product here, and is anyone going to really care or know? And is it worth all that extra work? Because unless you're going to do it yourself, you're going to be paying other people to create the sheet music and then hire the orchestra and all of the components that go into that and the mixing. And the one part no one ever talks about is when you hire an orchestra, you can't change it easily. You can, I guess, if you're in Hollywood, but it's one of those things that what you've decided is permanent. It's now part of the track because it's recorded into the audio. It's baked in. You can't just go into your Cubase session and edit a note because you had a wrong note or you change your mind, right? No. That's like the final step. So there's a lot of finality to hire an orchestra that I will say hiring an orchestra is for like 1% of the projects. It's almost never the right answer. It's very rare that it's the right answer. I'd much rather encourage you to hire a soloist to have that emotion and to save a bunch of money and have the flexibility of your DAW session. But if you do want to go that route, I would highly recommend, in this day and age of COVID and the whole world working remotely and online, and most orchestras not even being open, at least not in the US. Some are, but it's not the same. They're like recording in groups and have to keep their social distancing and stuff. So it's just a very different experience. I would recommend using Musiversal. I just typed it in the chat there, Musiversal. They're one of the best out there that's cost friendly. They are based in, oh my goodness. It'll come to me. Could you tell my brain's really slow today? I'm like forgetting basic stuff. Oh, they're in Budapest, of course, in Hungary. So I've worked with them a couple times, and I've really enjoyed working with them. And since we are on a streak here of just posting all the YouTube videos today, let me post one for you. You may have joined. This was like 5 months ago. I want to find the live one. Back when I was recording with Musiversal, we were doing the Budapest strings for Realm Weaver. I'm looking for it. But we did the whole session live stream. It might take too long to find, but here's one of them. All right. Thank you, ads. There we go. And that was for Lorian. Hope that answered some of the question. The truth is, an orchestra is not usually the right answer for what you need, but if you really want to go that route, I would go with them. I just think that they have a really cool remote way of doing it, where it's literally a Zoom call and you're talking with the actual orchestra live. It's pretty cool, and they can record it, all the videos, and they'll send them to you. It's really, really cool. What else we got? Thanks for everybody just kind of popping in and saying, hey. Marvinius says, when you're composing, do you write a melody before you make the whole arrangement with chords, rhythm, etc.? My approach changes based on the context, to be totally honest. I've taught before here on YouTube and in one of my Udemy courses. I've taught about the 3 different writing styles and how there's only 3 ways to write music. You can start with a melody, you can start with a harmony, or you can do a holistic approach where you do both at once at the same time. Not to oversimplify the creation of music, but it really can be divided into those 3 styles. And you might, if you're going to start with rhythm would fall under the category of harmony. It's the supporting layer. Melody is the main event. It doesn't have to actually be a melody, but it's the main event. So it just depends on the context of which of those 3 styles you're going to use, and it changes all the time. Because sometimes you want to start with a main theme. If we're talking about a film score or a video game, whatever, a podcast, these are different things that you'd really want to have a main theme. So you're going to start with the melody, you're going to write it out, and then do everything else to support it, right? That way you can use that melody again later times in the show. But if you compare that to, you just need background music for a YouTube video, you're probably not going to use a melody at all. Then you are really going to just focus on the chords, like a pop song. Or if you know that you are going to write something that's supposed to be much longer, like a 5-minute piece of music, you might just start with chords. That way you can get a harmony going, you can get a vibe going, and then you can figure out how to add a melody on top. So it just depends on the context. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Jazz. Yeah, we got people all over the world. This is awesome. I love chatting with you guys. Sergio says, hey, Steven, I'm going to the game jam. You're going the game jam route for networking, and I'm doing the weekly 1-minute track. Right now I have like 12 tracks on SoundCloud, and I'm sharing on social media. How can I actually get the job? You might want to rephrase your question, but are you asking just how do you get work in the game industry in general? Because it sounds to me you're taking a great step by just meeting other game developers, by doing game jams. I love that you're doing that, and you're not using global pandemic as a excuse, because very few people are meeting together and doing a traditional game jams anyway. So most of our work has become remote. So I think that's really cool. I would highly suggest keep doing what you're doing. Keep meeting with game developers however you can and just working with them, especially at these early stages. If you don't have a lot of credits under your belt, something that's worked for me several times is just to connect with game developers on Twitter or any other place that they hang out, and you offer them free things. And that's not to devalue yourself, but you are showing your investment in their game. And that can mean writing a custom track. It can mean giving them a track to use that you've already written. Save yourself time. It could be giving them a game music pack, whatever. But you're getting on their radar. And 2 of the biggest games I've worked on have been a direct result of that exact tactic. I'm not saying it's going to work every time, but it's something that is just one of the ways that you can get a leg up by being more invested than any other composer is in their game. That's a big way of doing that. Joel says, hey, Steven, I'm Joel from Paris. What's up? A pianist and music composer living in Germany. I started to work as a piano teacher and asking myself how to get into the game industry with my music compositions. Well, I'd say the same thing to you and Sergio, that it's important to be present, be in the industry. If you really want to write music for games, then you need to, first of all, game developers have to know you exist. So there's that. But you also have to be active. You have to be active. So for many composers, that's going to be go create some game music packs. That's a great way to create some passive income, to constantly be working. But there's also a marketing side here that you need to make sure that people know you exist and people know what you do. So that could look like doing a YouTube show every single week. That's what I've been doing for a while now. The live composing show where I literally write music. And that's a great way just to constantly be active and constantly force yourself to write music and to have these assets to sell somewhere. But beyond the money side, it's anything you can do to connect with game developers is going to be really positive. No one gets hired because you exist, right? You get hired because you're the most appropriate person for the job that the person knows. And I talk about this a lot here on this show, but if you're not in the phone, if you're not a contact, you're not going to get hired. Plain and simple. When I need to hire somebody, if I need to hire an assistant or an orchestrator or a musician, I literally go here and I find, oh yeah, there's that violin player. Hey, oh yeah, there's the orchestrator. I worked with them before. That was awesome. There's the songwriter that I've written a song with before. Let's give them a quick call. Let's shoot them a quick text. And usually, for those of you who have been hired by me before, which is quite a few people by now, if you're someone that's been hired by me, you can probably attest to this, that I usually give you a call and you're hired within 30 minutes of the need because I need you. I either want to work with that person or I want to work with someone who has that skill set. And I literally go through my phone and I pick somebody and it's usually the first person who answers the phone that gets the job. It's not always the most qualified person. It's not the most skilled person. It's the person who's available and willing to do the work well. And that's usually how it works. And that kind of transcends the music industry. That's just life. If you want to get a job in any industry, then you need to be in the phone of people who hire. And the game industry, specifically the indie game industry, it's a little bit different because it's not all structured and corporate, but typically 2 to 3 game devs work on one game. So you need to be in the phone of all of them. And Twitter's a great place to at least start the conversation. These game jams are a great place to start the conversation. If they buy your music pack, it's a great place to start the conversation. There's a lot of ways in. You just got to make sure that once you're in, and you actually do something about it and stay in. Most people think, oh, I had a game once. Okay, awesome. Congrats. Right? I've written for a lot of games, me personally, and it does not guarantee another game ever. I have to hustle every single time if I want another game, if I want another film, whatever. No one's entitled to more work just because you've had work. We all have to go out there. And that's probably one of the myths is if someone, quote, has made it, that, oh, they're just going to get more work. No. You have these people, me, I have to continually put myself out there and ask for work. I have to... Not that I'm ever begging, but you know what I mean? I have to be active. I have to be present. Let's keep going. These are great questions, guys. I'm more than halfway. You guys are asking so many questions. I love it. I hope this is valuable for you guys. David says, any advice on finding work as a composer assistant? Ooh, this is awesome. I keep answering the questions you guys are asking before you even ask them. That's pretty cool. David, that's literally the same thing I just talked about. Whether you want to write music for a game, you want to write music on any project, or you want to assist a composer to help them write music or whatever, it's the exact same thing. If you're not in my phone, you will not be hired by me. Plain and simple. That's how it goes. And I'll also throw this other caveat out there that if I have not talked to you one-on-one, you're not getting the job. Because the work I do is it requires so much trust from my clients because they're paying thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for me to provide a very high quality product. So if you are not a trusted person in my world, that I know that I'm going to pay you X $1,000 to do this thing and I can have hands off. Here are the rules. Here are the instructions. Go and do. Here's the deadline in 3 days, whatever. If we don't have that connection, if we don't have that man, if we don't have that connection and that trust, why would I hire you? And that's the mindset we need to reverse engineer if we want to work with anybody. And I'll be totally honest that I don't feel like I'm on this super high pedestal or anything, but I've done enough work now in the industry that I'll say frequently, I won't pick on any of you because I know you guys would never do this, but I often get emails from potential, let me just be frank. I get emails from people who want to work with me, or they want to, quote, be my assistant, whatever. But I'll just be honest, guys. I delete those emails, or I respond with like 5 words. Hey, great to meet you. No thanks. Or like whatever. It doesn't feel good for me to get those emails, and it doesn't help you. If anything, it like blacklists you, because it puts you in a place where you're literally just asking for something and you never gave something. And I tell this story a bit, that when I got to work and be an assistant for Gary Scheinman, one of my favorite composers, a legendary composer for film, games, and TV. I reached out to him. This was back in 2014. I reached out to him as an admirer, first and foremost, but I offered something like, hey, I would love to hang out with you in your studio. Here's something that I can do for you. And we talked about how I could program contact instruments for him, something that I was pretty skilled at, and something that I knew I'd be able to help him out as a big A-list composer, that he wouldn't have to do anything for me, that this was 100% something I just wanted to do to help him. And he opened the doors to me, and that started a cool relationship. And the story goes that actually led to a long-term assistantship with another composer, and the whole thing kind of went from there, and that helped grow some of my career. And certainly he had to be kind of letting me, like he exercised some trust in letting me do that. But at the end of the day, I also followed through and did a great job and earned his trust, and it led to more opportunities. And I think the moral of the story there is to find creative ways to be useful, find creative ways to be valuable to the people you want to work with. And that also transcends all industries. So if you want to work with a particular composer, by all means, start a relationship with them, but give something to them. And don't just ask, hey, what can I do to help you? I'm skilled at this. To me, that's like an instant delete email. Thankfully, I'm not that cold-hearted. I will still respond to you, but it's going to be really short and dry. Like, hey, cool, thanks, nice to meet you. No thanks. It's going to be very, very short because I don't got time for that. Neither do you. I'm not gonna inflate your ego and lead you on. But the idea is offer value and be creative. So if you know that someone you want to work with has a particular struggle or a particular need, a particular problem, offer something. That's it, man. It's all about offering value. So I'll move on from that. F. Karov, however you say your username. Hey, thanks for your videos. Do you have a personal list of books for composers? Why, yes, I do. Let me find it. Let's see, where is my list? It might be the same link I've already posted. Yeah, it is. Here you go. I need to update this list because I actually have some other book recommendations. But because you asked, and I have it right now, check out this link. I just tagged you in it. And they're not all about composing, because composing is business, it's production, it's composing, and then it's technology. You have to know all 4 pieces. I call them the 4 pillars. You got to know all 4. If you don't know one of those, you need to go study that, because if you don't know one, then you're going to fall, and it's not going to hold your career. Jacob says, hey, Stephen, how's the fam? Well, not great. We're recovering from sickness. We will be great. We have good attitudes. How's that? Stephen Crevis says, what are your favorite sound libraries? Wow, we're just asking all the questions. This is 1 year old, but I'll still give it to you. I think the default answer is my own sample libraries are my favorite. So the link I'm sending you is my list of best sample instruments in 2020. So it's a year old, but it's still good. I wouldn't take any of these off of the list. I would just add to the list. I would add some from my own company, Simple Samples Audio, because, well, I like to think I believe in what I do. Arrow to the Jess. Hi. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part. Jacob says, do you have any tips to composing, producing for royalty-free music libraries? I already have some sales, but I find it pretty hard to turn it into quite more significant income. Ooh, let's talk about that. Okay, listen up, people. I need to have another public chat interview with Avery Berman. If you don't know him, he is one half of Elevate Audio, one of the most successful, company. It's one of the most successful audio brands on Audio Jungle. And we were recently chatting last week, actually, about the current state of the music industry for sync licensing, which is royalty-free music. We were just having a back and forth about it's in a very troubling spot, and it's hard to know where the industry is going to go from here. But I trust his opinion on this because he's really, this is all he does. This is his thing. Or I should say most of what he does is constantly create really high quality royalty-free music and has been used in thousands of productions and commercials and stuff. So he really knows the game of quality and quantity. But he's saying that, man, his sales have dropped dramatically and across the board. That's for everybody. It's like 40% or 50% across the board because clients are now using subscription services, things like Epidemic Sound and even Audio Jungle. They have their Envato bundle thing, which is a subscription. You get unlimited access to everything. But even that has significantly less income opportunities than before. So it's hard to know where we're at. It's almost, I won't share my opinion because I don't know if I have enough skin in the game to really have a valid data point, but his opinion right now is he's like, man, I'm going all in on custom music because it's the only differentiator between me, like our company, and everyone else. Because it's basically a race to the bottom. For those of you who've studied any kind of economics, right? There's supply and demand, and the supply has just been so overwhelmingly saturated with music that now these companies such as Audio Jungle, et cetera, just to help mitigate, they've gone the Netflix subscription models dynamic where, you pay one price per month, $20, and now you can use hundreds of tracks. And get this, guys, I am a composer. I am someone who literally makes this stuff, and it is worth more of my time and talent I subscribe to these services so that I can have music for my YouTube videos. And isn't that crazy? So I would rather pay $20 than write my own track because my time is worth more than $20, significantly more. And that's just the model that we're fighting against. So anyone who wants to do royalty-free music, this is a very tough time to enter the business because it's in a severe decline. So I would encourage you to do what Avery does and pivot. We always have to pivot in business. Nothing lasts forever. No business model lasts forever. The industry constantly changes. Come on, let's just look back as recently as, the year 2000, 2001. maybe even as late as 2005 or so, where iTunes, right, totally disrupted the entire industry. Spotify disrupted it. So here we are in another disruption where these subscription models have disrupted our livelihood, and it's not a very sustainable thing going forward. So either you got to pivot or get out of the way, right? And hey, what's up, Matt? Matt Everett. I'm glad you joined on here. I'll give a shout out to Matt. Matt is someone that I worked with. He did some orchestration work with me for Realm Weaver. He was a lot of fun working with. He's probably a perfect example of someone who reached out and had something valuable to offer me. And we had a conversation. I think we talked for a couple hours about Zelda and whatever, and music. And then we worked together. So it's like, there you go. There's a perfect example. And I know a lot of you guys here on the chat I've worked with. Because this is real life, right? Like real conversations, even like this, a YouTube Live. It's a cool way to get to know people. And yeah, so I'll get off my high horse on that subject. But I hope you guys will learn from the trends. Look at the data. And I know that even in 2020, I was preaching game music packs quite a bit. This whole idea of, game developers are really buying these things up, get it while it's hot. I think some of that's still there, but my sales have declined a lot too in the last 6 months, like significantly. So there's something in the ether, right? There's something about people want custom music, but they can't afford it. So go solve that problem. I won't even tell you what the right answer is because economics, right? Either you need to charge high and be high quality, or you need to charge low and go high quantity and do a lot of it. Do a lot of little projects, or do few big projects. That's kind of it. That's the industry right now. And it's frustrating because 2019, I released this book behind me, Family First Composer, and it's already out of date. There's still a lot of principles. I tried really hard to write a book based on principles instead of fads, but it's just crazy. You mentioned the word Instagram, or you mentioned, there's no TikTok in that book. It wasn't a thing, right? There was no, I'm not sure I even mentioned email marketing in the book, but now that's like the thing. It's one of the only ways it seems to get sales these days. And so tactics will change. Tactics always change. You have to be aware of that as a business person. You should always be paying attention to what the tactics are, but ground your business in principles. And so I think the principle here that we've been talking about probably for 20 minutes now is value other people, serve other people well. And the other principle, which is equally important, is to be flexible and pay attention to what's going on. That way you can pivot and you can figure out. So like right now, I haven't written any music for royalty-free marketplaces in like years, 2 or 3 years, because it's not a very viable marketplace right now. So I know that was like a super long answer, but Jacob, I hope that that's helpful to help give you some insider insights into, it's a race to the bottom because people will keep dropping their prices until it's just worthless. It's not a good trade-off of your time. I'm not saying it's going to go the way of the Fiverr model of like devaluing music to the point of let's license everything for $1. I'm not saying we're going to get to that point, but we're pretty close. We're pretty close with this whole subscription thing. It might even already be there. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to skip ahead. Eunice says, how's your week going? Honestly, pretty crappy, but I'm glad you're here. This is a really cool chat. Let me skip down a little bit. I can't quite answer all your questions or else we're going to be here forever. It's interesting to see some of these duplicate questions though. So hopefully I've answered many of them. Jez says, if I make a music pack, I have to register it. Is that the best way to do that? I think I just hit on that, so we'll pass. Jordan Mallory Skinner says, for a composer with not much interest in sound design, how important do you think it is to be able to use Fmod or Wise? Are there certain genres that require knowledge of these software? It's a catch-22 question because middleware, Fmod, Wise, and Elias Studio, however you say it, those are the three pieces of software to do middleware, or to do what do you even call it? Interactive music. They're pieces of software that if you've already written a piece of music, you can throw it into this software, into this engine that can then connect to Unity or Unreal or any number of game engines. And you as the composer have the power and the control to decide what parameters are going to activate or disable tracks. So you might write layers. You could have 5 layers of intensity for a piece of music. This one could be soft and ambient, and then there's a drums, and then there's strings, and then brass, right? And you might want in a combat, as soon as you kill this enemy, then this track, 5 layers goes down to 4. So that's the kind of stuff that you as the composer can decide, and you would program all that within middleware. So it really has, you mentioned sound design, but middleware is not really for sound design. It's for connecting the two worlds. Because a lot of times a game developer they want their music to be interactive, but they don't know how to do it. They either don't have the technological skill because they haven't learned the software, or they don't really know how to problem solve musically. Because let's be totally honest, you don't want a game developer programming your music if you can help it. Because what's going to happen, no offense to game developers, they're very smart at what they do, but they're not musicians usually. And so they might just think, oh, here's a piece of music, let me throw it into the game. Or here's 2 layers of music, right? There's ultimately going to be some kind of miscommunication, or at the very least, a simplification of what you wanted to happen. So my suggestion is go learn the software, because it's very basic. You don't have to get super good at it. Just get good enough to be able to throw your music into and understand that if you understand that process, whether or not you ever end up doing it, you can then at least know how to explain the process the next time you're writing on a game, and the game developer wants some kind of variable to happen. Then you can say, oh, hey, yeah, if we use Wise, there's a function in there that lets us change the music from daytime to nighttime. Or let's say one of our party members dies, then maybe the music's going to change to this other variation I wrote. They might not even know that's possible until you mentioned it, because you are the problem solver. So this is me just as your fellow composer friend. If you want the most opportunities possible, and if you want to be as valuable as possible to the game teams that you want to serve, go learn your tools. Go get good at your tools. Go be a master of your tools. That way you can have these conversations. And not to go too far on a diatribe here, but Realm Weaver, which is the game I just scored with an orchestra, which was super cool 5 months ago. For that game, one of the conversations I was having with the game developer was pretty much that we just talked about. I said, hey, on the world map, here's this theme I wrote. I know you like it, but how cool would it be if we had 10 different variations of the world map theme? I'll give you all these layers, and then based on the circumstances of maybe it's raining, maybe it's not, maybe someone in your party died, or maybe there's another enemy on the world map. This is a 2D strategy game, so think of Final Fantasy Tactics. You're on the world map, and there's different events happening in real time. That's the allure of the game. That's one of the strategy aspects. So he didn't know those things existed. So that's why me as the composer, even though I'm not great at Wise or Fmod or Elias, I know the basics. And ultimately, if I really wanted it to be done super well, I'd probably hire one of you. If one of you is super good at that, That'd be something that I'd hire out probably. But you see what I'm saying, that by at least having a basic understanding of how the software works, I was then able to communicate with the developer. Hey, wouldn't this be cool? And guess what that translated into? It meant that I got to write 10 variations of the world map, which meant more music, which meant higher pay, which meant more time with the orchestra, which meant a longer soundtrack, which means longer streaming time. It earns me more money, allows me to serve them better, creates a better soundtrack, allows me to hire more people. It's all very beneficial, all because I knew what was possible using the software. So there you go. Hopefully that's a helpful perspective. Tom Akrafir says, how do you organize your time while working on video game projects? I love how you guys are all talking about video games. That's one of my struggles, is branding, for sure. And we can talk about that if you want. Because I've had experience in, most types of media, but games are the one thing that I keep getting drawn back to because I think it's my favorite. I think I can say that out loud, right? So I love answering video game questions. It's probably my favorite thing to talk about. How do you organize your time? That's a big question. Do you have a specific question? Just so I don't want to spend an hour talking about that. Because organizing your time is it's a principle, it's a concept that applies to all areas of your life. It's not really specific to writing music. So I'd love to know if there's a deeper question there that can better help. Tristan says, is co-composing a good way to do your first soundtrack? Oof. Tristan. Oh man, what a good question. 100% yes. I would encourage you to talk with Peter Jones and see if he would agree with you. The reason I bring up Peter, almost exactly a year and a half ago, I hired Peter as my co-composer for Monster Sanctuary. When I was hired for Monster Sanctuary, very large soundtrack and a very short time frame. And I knew right off the bat that I wanted to work with another composer who had a very different style of music than me, because I knew that I could do it. I was perfectly capable of doing the soundtrack, but the problem was first of all, I just wanted to work with another composer. And second, the game itself almost called for two different styles of music because it's a blend of multiple genres. It has RPG elements, but it also has Metroidvania platformer elements. I'm much more of an RPG composer, always have been. I'm a melody composer. I write a melody first, and then I make the piece of music around it. But Peter is quite the opposite. He makes really, really cool soundscapes and ambiences, and he definitely has his roots in JRPGs, but more so in, if I'm the Nobu Uematsu style, he's much more of like the Yasunori Mitsuda style, which both work, but there's a reason that those two dudes work together on Chrono Trigger, because their talents really sparked each other to do great things. And I feel like that's, we had this synergy going on. So, and we had already worked together before. And there was something about having a co-composer that, even though I did the bulk of the work of the soundtrack, it was so cool just getting to share new ideas with him. And then he'd either improve it, or he'd say, nope, that's great by itself. Or he would start an idea and then I would finish the idea, whatever. And it became this really cool, true collaboration. I think there's so much value there. And he doesn't have a lot of game credits, but he's super talented. And I'd like to think that has been a really cool stepping stone for him. And I love helping other people in their careers. So I think anytime that you can collaborate with someone, it's a win for everybody. It's not even like he's riding my coattails or anything of that nature. He helped me a lot, and I really appreciate him as a friend and as a coworker. So I just think it helps everyone, and it's super cool. And why not share the glory of the win, right? Isn't that what teamwork's all about? Let's scroll down here. Robin says, "What's in the coffee?" I know I've been drinking on this forever. I like to change it up sometimes, but today is cinnamon, heavy whipping cream, and vanilla extract. It's like my healthier version of coffee. It's quite good. You should try it sometime. It's a nice cinnamony flair. Desmond says, "How do I get on your phone?" You really want to know? Can I give you the secret? Contact me and offer me something super valuable that I can't do for myself for free. And that is not me asking you, because quite frankly, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I need. And this is like if you can get this, I know I've been talking for an hour, guys, but for those of you still hanging with me here, apparently 50 of you are, so I'm doing something right, I guess. Or you guys are just like making fun of me. I don't know. If there's one thing I can just like punch you in the face with that I've been learning that can really help you is, if you really want to take that next step in your career, if you want to work with somebody in life, offer them something so good for free or at a discount, whatever, something that is so valuable for them that they can't refuse. Can I give another example of a recent collaboration that was very unexpected, but I want to give praise to this person. So many of you know, as the founder of Simple Samples Audio, I started this 6 months ago. And one of my big struggles up to this point is figuring out what on earth do I make? Because I can make a lot of things. I can record a lot of people. I can create my own instruments, whatever. But, figuring out what would be a valuable use of my time, what kind of instrument should I make for you guys? And I've talked with you guys, and I have pretty strong data points. I've done surveys and that kind of stuff to help figure out what you guys want. But I want to give a huge shout out to Matt Dewson, also known as Heavy Bones. He reached out to me not too long ago, a few months ago, and he was, for those who don't know, he's a super talented ambient composer over in Australia, making his way as a film composer, as a soundtrack artist. Super talented, just not super well known yet. Big yet. He reached out to me, just wanted to chat, just wanted to meet me, and I, a lot of times I get emails like this, and I responded back to his email. I think one of the first things I said was, "I'm going to let you try again." Because here's what happened. That same day or the day before, I got another one of these emails. I mean, I get these a lot. Well-meaning, kind composers who've watched my videos, listened to my podcast, taken a course, read my book, something. And this is why I do so much, because it clearly reaches you people. Because my heart is to help you. And so often I get these emails or these DMs, not from you guys, of course, not you guys, but the other audience members. And I think just the day before, they were asking, "Hey, can you get me some work? Hey, I'd love to work for you. Do you have work for me? I'm really talented at this. And I was just like, come on. And I gave them, I'm just saying, if you're going to email me like that, if you're going to say something like that, I'm going to be super honest with you. And I'm going to give you not a verbal lashing by any means. I'm going to be kind about it, but I'm going to tell you, this is not valuable. This is not a helpful way for you to try to advance your career. This is actually very self-sabotaging. This is a great way to become blacklisted by spamming people and asking things from them. Why don't you try offering something before you ask? And I have a book over here. You can't see it, but it's on my book list I just posted in the chat. It's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. It's by Gary Vaynerchuk. It's one of the most important reads you could ever read. Highly recommend it. It's on my book list. Jab, 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 right hook. It's a very simple concept. I love Gary Vaynerchuk. He has a sailor's mouth, but he has some seriously good, simple truths about entrepreneurship. Jab, 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 right hook is, if you don't read the book, understand the title, that if you punch, I actually do kickboxing, so I really understand this metaphor, that if you jab, 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 then go in for the right hook, your right hook will actually mean something. Because in boxing, you never go in for the hook first because you're going to get killed. Because your jab is your short punch. It's not for power. It's not going to be the knockout. It's to take them off guard, boom. And then you can go in for the right hook. So if you apply this to your business, it's basically just reteaching us humanity, how to be a human. Give, 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 then ask. Give, 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 then ask. That's it. That's the principle here. So let's rewind back to my story here. So Heavy Bones, Matt Dewson, he emailed me. He was very polite. He was super kind. He's like, hey man, I've read your book. I've watched your videos. Love what you do. Love what you stand for. How can I help you? How can I serve you? And it was awesome. And I was like, okay, cool. I replied back, thank you so much for the kind words. I'd like to encourage you to try again. Offer me something I can't refuse. That's how you work with me. And that's true of everything in life, right? Give, 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 then ask. So he is one of the only people that has ever heard that reply and didn't just give up and say, screw it, what's the point? He actually came back to me that night, like 12 hours later, and he had recorded, I think it was 10 pieces. This is insane, guys. He recorded like 10 pieces of music. Here's what he did. He read my email. We were talking about synthesizers or something. And I think I said, hey guys, yeah, I'm getting into analog synthesis. I'm getting into this ambient world. I'm not super talented at it. And he heard there's an opportunity. So he actually created 10 ambient tracks. He's like, hey man, I just want you to have these. Maybe these will be useful for you. Here's what I do. I take my electric guitars and synthesizers. I run them through all these effects and I create these really cool ambient noises, these soundscapes. And then I heard those and I said, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then I think like the next day I hired him. I bought those tracks. I didn't want them for free because they were super valuable. I bought them from him and I asked him, can you make 40 more? Or something like that. And we collaborated and created Heavy Bones Granular Pads, which is now, one of the new releases at Simple Samples Audio. And it's a really cool library that serves you guys well. And there's just a story of a guy who wanted to work with me, but he went to the next level and he actually did something about it that really caught my attention. And what's interesting is he caught my attention by being himself, because I can't do what he does, but I can amplify what he does. And now his name, his brand, his product, our collaborated product is now in front of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, because we actually also partnered with audio plugin deals and has had thousands of downloads. And it's super cool. I just think it's super cool. And I think that, like, what a cool way to do business. So if you guys ever do want to work with me, and this is not me promoting because I'm fine. Like, I don't know that I need anything, right? But that's how you can be creative and crafty in this industry, man. Find ways that can really help people, that just blow them away. And of course they're going to want to work with you, right? Eunice says, I keep seeing on Twitter people begging developers the line, wondering if you're looking for a composer. Yeah. I don't know if I want to go on that tangent, but yes. I think we can all based on the conversation we just had about jab, 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 right hook, I think we can all take that same train of thought and understand that if you are asking before you've given, you will never get what you ask for. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. If you want something, give, then ask. Which is why I tell you guys to, if you want if you want to work on a game project, if you want to write music for a game project, give free, valuable things. And then ask. Don't be stupid and only give free things, because then you are devaluing what you do. And that's why I've created a Twitter script for anyone who cares. There's a DM script I have as part of that video on YouTube as well. And it's quite simple, but it's based around, hey, I would love to write a custom track for your game, for you to use in your game or your trailer. If you like it, you can use it for free. And I'd love to discuss being hired to do the rest of your soundtrack. Like there's a give, ask. There's an asking component, because you have to ask at some point, right? That's what sales is all about. You have to ask, but you can't just ask first. It doesn't work. It's not human. Anyway. AW Melody says, I absolutely enjoy your videos. Thanks. I have found them very insightful. What are some ways to improve your mindset in the studio? I'm super young in music production and strive to improve. You're going to have to be more specific on that one, because that's mindset. I don't know what you mean. Can you be more specific? And thanks, Jacob. We're getting through it. No one likes being sick, but I feel like we'll be out of the woods by the end of this week. Into the woods. Will says, I still can't find the perfect game genre to compose for. I'm thinking action adventure. Awesome. Then don't. Let the market choose for you. If you can't decide, let the market decide for you. Zoom out a little bit. Instead of calling yourself an action adventure game composer, just say game composer. If you don't know if you want to do games only, just call yourself a music composer, right? Zoom out. Zoom out until the market says otherwise. Then you can zoom in. If you know what you want to do, great. Go super narrow, super niche, and you will get more of that type of work because you're a specialist. But if you don't know that about yourself, if you're not committed to that, then you got to zoom out and just allow the market to decide. The market meaning sales, real money, real projects. Not what you think, but what the data actually says. Trevor, what's up, Trevor? Welcome. Haven't seen you here before. Trevor Hewer says, hey, Stephen, just started working through the book. A very welcome perspective shift. Excited to read the rest. I appreciate that, man. Let me know if you have any questions about it or any thoughts. I was saying earlier in this super long chat that the book is based on principles of putting family first, based on principles of passive income and a lot of financial and work ethic principles. However, there are a few tactics in there that are outdated. So I'd be curious to hear, now that you're reading through it right now in 2021, I would love to hear, if you want to follow up with me, I would really love to hear if you feel like it's still fully relevant. And if there's anything in there that you feel like, I don't know if this still applies today. I'd love to go back through that. One of my hopes, I haven't made it a goal yet, because a goal means you have a date. So I haven't put it in the calendar, but one of my hopes is this year to update the book to make it as relevant as possible, especially post-COVID, if we can say that. Because I feel like the world has shifted to an even more online space, to an even more remote space. And in this music world, some of the things I was saying earlier today about music packs and royalty-free music really are not super great income sources now. There's been a shift in the market. So I might want to spend some more time in the book giving some caveats that, hey, this is not going to be quite the payoff as it was even just 2 years ago. It's pretty wild how much things can change, Sergio, what do you mean? He says, are you going to do roast and post on Discord? I don't even know what that means, but sure. Will Cobb. Let me give a shout out to Will Cobb. I don't know if he's still in the chat. This is, a while ago when he posted, but he says, how do you get work done with your kids? Will is a client I've worked with quite a bit on his films, Cobblestone Productions. He does some really cool stuff. He does a lot of wedding videos, but he uses drones, which is really cool. So he makes these huge cinematic, these beautiful videos. So I've had the pleasure of working with him, and he was one of my childhood friends growing up. So really cool dude. You should go say, hey, Will. And to answer the question, how do I get work done with kids? Can I be honest? That's the struggle. That's one of the struggles. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book that I probably should talk even more about now, post-COVID. Life, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to oversimplify life, but whatever's in your calendar is what you do, right? If your priorities, let me rephrase that. Your priorities are in your calendar. They're already there. If it's not in your calendar, it's not a priority. So for me, there's a certain amount of work that I need to do per week to maintain what I've built, to water the seeds, so to speak, and to harvest the seeds if it's harvest time. There's different seasons of harvest, right? If we're talking about this farming analogy, there's a certain amount of time I have to spend. And I say have to. I mean, I could theoretically just stop answering support emails and stop taking new clients. I could stop writing music. And I might not see the effects for several months because that's the nature of passive income. Is it's not truly passive, but it has a very long shelf life. It won't expire for 3 to 6 months. And that's the coolest part about it. But with that in mind, there are a certain number of hours that I need to set aside as a priority in order to maintain and water and harvest. So what that means for me is roughly 10 to 15 hours is what I need to set aside in the week. So every Sunday, I plan ahead for the following week, and every week of my life is quite different. I have 4 kids, and 2 of them are babies. Sometimes they're sick. Sometimes they have to be home. I'm the taxi driver for most things around here because I work from home, and I'm here when kids get home from school. I'm constantly taking kids back and forth to doctor's appointments and dentists and all these things, right? So my life is very much on the go, and I have to replan my schedule every single week. It's different every week, but I put as a priority in my schedule, in my my calendar, here are 2 hours, here are 3 hours, here are 2 hours, whatever. And it usually ends up being 10 to 15. That's the amount that I need. And so it becomes very critical that I use my time wisely and I write down what I'm actually going to do during that time period. It's not enough to just say, that's studio time. Who cares? It's not valuable. So something that I've been really wrestling with this year is how do I decide to do one meaningful thing every work day? So I'm going to work Monday through Thursday every week or Monday through Friday every week. If I only have 2 hours a day, what is one meaningful 2-hour task that I can do? So that's what I've started to do in January, is every day. I've not been successful at it every day, but what I've started to do is set aside every day gets one bullet point. So what I do is, I put the doctor's visits and I put all the things, but then I leave a studio spot. And then I put one bullet in there. Do this today, which is usually create new product or update a product or contact this person to help create a product or write music or whatever. And it's usually, I try to really make it a meaty 2-hour task with no distractions. And that's all I get. And so the days that I've done that, I have kicked some butt because those days I get that one thing done and I'm feeling on top of the world because, man, I just did this significant, meaningful task that moved my business forward, created new income streams or supported old income streams, whatever. And think about that. I mean, even if you were to take 4 weeks off of vacation for an entire year, that's 270 meaningful tasks in 1 year. Whose life could you change? What kind of impact could you make in this world if you did 270 meaningful things? So then that brings up the question, okay, what does that mean I can't do? What does that mean I'm going to do? And you have to really start eliminating the things that are not the most important. And that's my mindset going forward. And so, what this does is it builds in margin into your life. It eliminates hurry from your life. It allows you to be flexible. It allows you to take phone calls. It allows you to be sick. It allows your family members to be sick, and it doesn't devastate your world. It just means you have to change things. It means your car can break down. And here's the other funny part about this week. Someone asked, how's your week been, Steven? Pretty crappy, actually, because we're all fighting sickness. I had to take the car in twice to the shop. So we've been, and on top of that, my wife's parents who live locally, they've also been taking their cars into the shop. And so I've been their chauffeur as well. So it's like, not only do I not have time to work, but I don't ever want to say obligation, but I have an opportunity to serve extended family as well. And that's just how this week has had to be. But you know what? I have still kept about 2 hours of work each day. And it has really forced me to ask this question every day. What is one meaningful thing I can do today? I can't do two. I do not have the energy, time, or bandwidth to do it. Man, that has totally wrecked my world and forced me to truly live out my priorities. Because when I do this, I am inevitably putting my family first because they are a higher priority than work. However, they know that when it's work time, it's work time. And I intentionally put work time in when the kids are not here. That makes sense, right? They're in school right now, this very second. So, but in a few hours, they will not be. They will be here and, so I don't work a lot, but the work I do is very meaningful. And that means the most to me because it's sustainable. All right. Let me skip down some of this right now. A lot of you guys are asking about middleware. It might be helpful for you. Let me post a link real quick. I do have a course on this on Udemy that is quite inexpensive that you guys will be able to get a really good overview. It's not super deep, but for those of you who've never used middleware, this will be a really, really good way to just get a few hours of experience in each of the three major middleware software, which are all free, which you can use freely. I think that'd be super helpful for you guys. So I can't answer all those questions right now, but I do address most, if not all, those questions in there. Sergio, nope, I do not. I do not copyright my music, meaning I don't register it with the U.S. Copyright Office because that is complete nonsense. It's totally irrelevant and doesn't matter at all. What I do though is I am a member of BMI, and every country does this differently. But within the U.S., there are three organizations called Performance Rights Organizations: BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated; ASCAP, the American Society of Composers and Publishers; and then CSAC, SESAC. Forgot what they stand for, but no one uses them. Just kidding. They're not as popular as the other two. But as a member, it's a free organization that will automatically register works whenever you get them sold in music marketplaces. So whenever you sign up for Audio Jungle or Pond 5 or whatever, right? All these different places. You are required when you do your taxes and such to give them your BMI or ASCAP or CSAC number, your identification number, at which point they will associate any of that stuff with you. So it bypasses the need to do any of this copywriting stuff because this stuff is done on such a global, massive scale that it's impossible to track all that. So yeah, hope that's helpful. So if you are going to sell music at all, make sure that you register with one of those places. Tom, I think I've already answered the question about like my capacity of how much I work in a day, which is usually 2 hours, sometimes 3 or 4, rarely. So that's it. I mean, if it doesn't matter how creative I'm feeling, I have to work within those confines because that is what serves my family. That is how I do life. So family is truly first in that way. When I am in the studio, I'm focused and there comes a point in your career, I don't know when, I think it's different for each person, but you can pretty much tell how long it's going to take you to write something. For me, it's a 3-hour to 1 minute exchange. That has always been true, and that will probably always be true. That if you hire me to write 1 minute of music, it's going to take me 3 hours to do it. Sometimes I'm way faster, but that is the amount of time that I'm going to block off in my schedule to write. That's if I'm the only one involved. If I am going to collaborate, then I might double that or triple that because it's just back and forth. But you will learn your own speed, and then you have to schedule around that speed, and you should charge based on that speed because I know what I want to make per hour in a general sense. So if it doesn't work, you know what I mean? If it doesn't add up, then I'm either charging too little or I'm working too much, that kind of thing. Daniel asks, if you are hired for a small film project, how do they guide you in the music making process? Do they give you the video, or do they say we need a 3-minute sad track, a 4-minute intense, etc.? Daniel, I'm going to share with you an old video, but it's still a good one. Here on YouTube, also a repost, so it's a very embarrassingly old video, but I'll still share it with you because the content's good. It's still accurate. It's called Spotting Sessions. Let me tag you in here. So this is an old tradition that's pretty much always been true about film scoring. Is there's this meeting called a spotting session, which is where the composer meets with the film team and they literally talk and they do line by line, scene by scene, cue by cue. You talk through all of the expectations. And if you're a wise composer, you will shut up, not talk, and just listen. And you'll take lots and lots of notes. And you'll make suggestions one-on-one later with the producer instead of publicly in that group setting. And I'll talk all about that. So hopefully that's a helpful video for you. I don't do as much film scoring these days, but that's never led me wrong because it focuses on the client over my own ego. All right. I'm going to skip some of these comments so we can get close to the bottom here. All right. Guys, I want to bring up something before we kind of wrap this party up. I have recently been reading a book called Master of One. I want to share two things with you guys. You guys have been very kind to hang out for this long, and I appreciate it. Hope this has been valuable just to kind of have a organic chat like this. I want to share a couple of things with you. There's some business happenings that might be interesting. The first one is, for those of you who follow Simple Samples Audio, it just released Monster Sanctuary Toolkit version 2.0. Put a video up yesterday here on YouTube. But just so you know, that is 40% off right now for the launch of that second version. Just wanted to pop that into your attention. That's in the link in the description. If you want to take advantage of that, If you are not aware, if you scroll down to the bottom of any of the pages, you can also jump into any of these bundles. So because that one's on sale, it also means Beard Blade Toolkit's on sale. You can grab both of those together. But for those of you who already own that, oops. Geez, what am I doing? There we go. For any of those of you who already own Monster Sanctuary Toolkit, if you have a previous version, all you have to do is go to Pulse, which is the downloader. Go in there, delete the folder completely from your hard drive, and just reinstall, and it'll give you the updated version. And that way I don't get 1,000 emails from you guys about, where is it? The other thing I want to mention, I've recently been reading a book which has really been shaking me. It's called Master of One by Jordan Raynor. I want to show that to you guys real quick. It's this one right here. Reading this sucker on my Kindle. It's a new book. It's from about a year ago. The subtitle is Find and Focus on the Work You Were Created to Do. Now, I found this to be very interesting because the core idea of the book is to do one thing, one career vocational thing with excellence. Not two, not three, but one. It kind of works through this process of how do we filter that and how do we get to the core of what we do best. And it kind of boils it into what you're most passionate about, what you're the most gifted at, and what serves people the best. And those are really the three criteria. You has to be all three. Can't be one without the other. And something that I've been struggling with and really trying to figure out is, what is my one thing? And that's something I'm still constantly trying to figure out. And I think when we talk about marketing and branding, that is something that has always confused me so much. And I had a mentor tell me recently, which I thought was very fascinating. He told me, Stephen, you're a great composer, but you can't compose business. That really struck me because he talked about the difference that when you compose music, when you're hired to write music, you kind of get a blank canvas. There's some rules, there's some limitations, whatever, but it's kind of a blank canvas to do you, right? To write your own melodies, to write your own harmonies, and maybe if it doesn't work, you try something else. And it's like this very iterative process of creativity and artistry. But when you compare that to business, business is based on facts. Business is based on rights and wrongs. It's based on principles. It's based on data. And when my mentor said that, it really struck me because for so long I have been composing business, doing things that I felt like doing, instead of basing things off of data, basing things off of facts. And that's something that I am actively seeking clarity on. I'm not even saying I've found it, but just to kind of give you a little insight into my brain at the moment, and then I'll wrap this party up. The reason I have such a hard time with branding and with marketing is because for the longest time, I've associated myself as the brand. Because I've been told my whole life, oh, you're a composer, so you are the brand. You're selling yourself. You're selling your personality. And so, of course, it makes sense on YouTube and podcasts and books and whatever to put on this persona, right? And to act a certain way, to perform a certain way. But what's interesting is I've learned that even as a composer, you're not selling yourself. It's quite the opposite. I'm selling an asset. But what is the asset? Is it the music? No, it's not the music. It's the experience. So each and every one of us who calls ourselves a music composer, each of us is a little Disney World. We're literally selling an experience. You're not selling yourself. You're not selling your music. You're selling an experience. Because with that lens, it starts to make sense why it's not the most talented people that get hired. It's the people in the phone. It's the people who are available. It's not always the people with the highest quality or the most experience. It's the people who are available. It's the people who had the connection, who had the friendship, right? Who added the value. And with that, if you kind of follow this train of thought, if I'm not associating myself as the brand, then where does that leave? Where does that leave me? And like, how do I brand that? Because I'm not branding myself. I'm branding the experience with me or my team, whatever. And again, it's not that I have this figured out, but this book has been really helpful to start the conversation about what is the one thing that I am called and made to do. And I'd love to hear from you guys, just as my active listeners and followers, just as friends in the industry. I would love to know if you would be so kind to just take a moment to type either in the live chat or in the comments once this video uploads. I would truly love to know, and this is not to stroke my ego because I don't need that. I don't want that. But I would love to know, what is one thing that I have helped you do? And I'll just leave it like that. Like, what is one thing that through something I've made or something I've said or something I've done that has really, truly helped you? I think that would be very helpful for me to help take the next step towards, okay, who's getting the most value from what I do? Is it the people reading the book? Is it people watching YouTube? Is it people buying the simple sample instruments? Is it people buying my music? And I hope that makes sense, because what I'm at a crossroads right now is trying to figure out, there's a lot of things I've done in my career, but I can't do them all with excellence, like the highest level of excellence, right? There has to come a point where I decide, okay, this is the one thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it to the absolute best of my ability with the extreme excellence and really make an impact doing that one thing. And perhaps it's zooming out and it's figuring that out. But I would appreciate that from you guys, that if that's something that you would feel, if you could say that honestly, that I've helped you do something or become something and experience something, that would be very helpful for me. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, if you want to type that in the live chat or the YouTube comments, I'd appreciate that. So with that, I'm gonna take a hike because I need to go hydrate. I've been talking for a while. I appreciate you guys, and lots of great questions here. And as always, I want to let you know that I'm always available as much as I can be to answer your questions. And even if I don't have the opportunity to email back or DM back, I hope that moments like this, I can tackle a lot of questions at once. And perhaps we'll do another one like this because you guys seem to have really liked this. So I appreciate you guys. I just wanted to spend some time with you today, talking and enjoying hanging out with you. So hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday and a great rest of your week. I know that my family's going to be slowing down and trying to recover for the next week, but I'll definitely be in touch with you guys about what's coming up next. But I appreciate you guys and your feedback, always super helpful. So you guys have a good one, and I'll chat with you later.